This is the first Employer Branding Africa Spotlight, and I am honored and I am excited that I've got Alex here today. And I think it's very important nowadays because, as we know, we're moving into a lot of global AI automation. So I've got a tight timekeeping on the questions and that, because obviously there's so much we want to speak to Alex about today. But without further ado, I'm going to be putting up slides just so that you can understand what the questions are we're going to be speaking to as we move through the hosted presentation. Any questions that you have, I would really appreciate that we can do the Q&A at the end so that we can keep the flow going. I'd love you to, in the chat, just tell us who you are and where you're from. It just gets the conversation going a little bit, and it also just creates some kind of camaraderie as well. So please also feel free to share the hashtag, which is EBA Spotlight 2024. I'd love people to start catching on more and more, because I do believe that building the African community around the thought leadership spotlights is very good way of actually creating a following around employer branding. Please feel free to put in the chat who you are and where you're from, so everyone knows what your interests are in being on the webinar today. First of all, I am Cape Town bred and born, South Africa. I am privileged to be staying in Cape Town, ranked as one of the top 50 cities in the world. We came second, which I was not aware of. And I'm very fortunate to be staying in this beautiful city. What I do is employer branding and recruitment marketing. I like getting up close and personal, as I say, getting an understanding of how people actually, or how companies put their people behind the success of meeting goals and objectives. I'm in consulting, I'm in project management, but I'm also in training and have recently, well, last year, built the Employer Branding Learning Academy. And this is really about assisting leaders like yourself to get to grips with employer branding and capitalize on the universal opportunities that Alex is going to share with us today. It's so important to bring our progressive countries' insights into Africa so we can actually start adopting all these wonderful best practices into our talent management strategies. Alex, I'd love you to introduce yourself to everyone and give us a little bit of insight.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, everyone. Good afternoon. It's morning here. Quite early here, about 7:09 a.m. But happy to be here. I was invited by Celeste. We connected in a employer branding global community that I built on Discord with a good friend and co-founder. And that led us to today. But at the moment, I am the head of employer brand at GoDaddy. So you probably know GoDaddy for the web hosting solutions and payment options, as well as any sort of small business options that you need. That's what GoDaddy does provide. But more specific to myself, I've been in the employer branding space for well over 7 years. Outside of GoDaddy, I've had the chance to also work at Informatica as a team of one there, formerly work at Cox Automotive, which is a global company. And outside of that, just do a lot of webinars, podcasts, in-person speaking gigs. And, Celeste said she wanted to start something brand new here in 2024. And I'm just blessed and honored to be the first of many amazing people who will be featured in the series.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Alex. And once again, thank you for setting the time aside and waking up at the crack of dawn to be with us here in South Africa. And
no worries.
Lovely to see some familiar faces as you were doing your introduction there. Not to be rude, I just wanted to get some insight on who was joining us today. There's people from across the globe, which is also exciting. And it's really about the joining of minds, bringing the experienced leaders into Africa. And we're not going to only have thought leaders that are universal, but also African-based, because I think it's important to actually get an understanding of the territory and how employer branding can be adopted within our African territory. I'm going to pose them to Alex and get an understanding, because at the end of the day, it's really about workplace knowledge. It's about the trials and tribulations that he basically had to navigate within GoDaddy, but he's also at the forefront of a community where everyone is sharing their knowledge, and he's got a wealth of information that he's here to share with us today. So first of all, I think this question is very apt because we are moving into AI, automation, and whilst people are very excited, Alex, there's also a bit of concern in terms of us all starting to sound the same, all starting to say the same thing, and almost becoming bland and unauthentic, unreal people, not real. And while we are right in the midst of it, I'd like to get an understanding in this age of curated content, how can companies encourage leaders and employees to bring their authentic selves while maintaining that brand consistency? Because obviously that is very important in terms of launching an employee advocacy program.
A good question. And I mean, you raised a valid point that I think, heightens the need for this even more. It's that there's a risk of everyone sounding bland, right? I mean, there's even an employer brand podcast called the Employer Bland Podcast. Sorry, there's brand bland, too many too many words there. But I think that does make this a higher priority, where you should allow your people to be their authentic selves, inside of work, outside of work. I know we talk about that primarily inside. I think the latest trend, which just happens to be very spot on with this talk, is employee advocacy. And allowing, I think it starts inside first. They have that trust where they know they can, they can give like proper reviews. Company has annual reviews, or they have, if they open it up that way where you can truly say how you feel, put that in there, whether it be on a Zoom call, in person, during the survey, but also you can reach out to leadership and be able to speak freely, in Slack or Teams. And there's making that place safe overall for them to have that ability to communicate. And then when it comes to pushing that externally, okay, hey, if you're concerned about them being on brand or knowing proper social media policies, to me that's very simple to take care of. It's an educational piece. It's a learning opportunity. And I think there's a lot of leaders who do fear that, because, okay, if this person is truly being an advocate and they're sharing all this stuff, they're going to leave the company. There's always a chance, but there's always a chance if they don't get a chance to do that, they will leave. But encouraging that, nourishing whatever they bring to the table and letting them, be themselves. I think that's probably the biggest thing. It doesn't need to be that difficult, but I find that it is that difficult, which is why, we're talking here in 2024, something that I've done since I've been in the space for 7 years, that a lot of companies are struggling to get to.
Okay, wonderful, Alex. And I've read quite a bit and have also seen that there's almost like that fear factor for employees to not speak their minds and almost feel like they have to have a staged opinion. And
Agreed.
That obviously creates the non-authenticity. But I think it's also up to leaders to put those boundaries in place, as well as your marketing and comms functional heads, to ensure that they don't need to gatekeep, but they need to just ensure that everything is on brand and that it's obviously not defamation of the corporate whole ID. And I think that's very important as well. It's often the fact that there's people don't have the enablers. And that enablement is really what creates the fear factor, I would think, as well, right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it definitely taken away the fear factor, but enabling individuals and stop being concerned about things. I mean, it's no different than, we all have led teams before, or we lead our families at home, and you're not there micromanaging them or clamping down on everything they say or do. You kind of give them a guideline or a handbook per se of things. Hey, this is kind of what I want you to do or to keep in mind, some blind spots to watch out for, but the rest is up to them. And I think the same should be when we have ambassadors out there, because we're not going to, you really can't control people say or do. And leveraging that ability where they feel comfortable enough to even talk about your company, I think is a win if you can get to that point.
Correct. Thank you for that. So
Sure.
this is, Alex, this is a burning question for me because I have worked on projects before where we build a compelling, future fit, authentic employer value proposition. Now we come to launching it, and it's about integrating it internally and then activating it externally. However, a lot of the time we find that for various reasons, your execs or your C-suite are not leading the way. And it could be for a number of different reasons I've seen. Is it could either be a time factor, it could be possibly because they are not being intentional about it. They're possibly forgetting to recognize and appreciate people living the values and the behaviors within their organization of this wonderfully crafted mission, purpose, value system and everything. But in your opinion, how do you feel execs and C-suites could actually lead by example more intentionally when it comes to activating an employee advocacy program?
I think first and foremost, it's supporting the employee advocacy program. That's a huge step because in most employer brand functions, shops, whatever you want to refer to it things as, they are one individual or the team is building this out, and they're getting a few people from different teams, primarily TA or marketing, that are doing this. And it doesn't, with any initiative that you have in any company, once leadership gets involved, tends to have a lot more visibility, a lot more credibility. But outside of that, actually using it, because it's one thing to tell your people to, hey, this is great, we should do this. There's a huge ROI behind it all, which there is. But if you're not using it yourself, then it's very hypocritical. I mean, people can't really trust what you say or what you're, not even doing. But doing that, and I know it can be busy. I mean, we all find different ways to post on social. It helps that there's scheduling options on LinkedIn natively now, and not everybody has Hootsuite or other platforms. I mean, I personally don't use those myself, but if they can't do that, I'd say, hey, working with a comms assistant or an EA assistant if they have that, but it would be way more meaningful if it comes directly from them. But finding a way just to have some sort of voice out there to show that you are probably the person with the most power at the table there in person or virtual, and you are actually putting your advocacy to work and speaking passionately about the company versus just having your name attached to some of these press releases. Like, that speaks volumes.
Right. Thank you for that. And I think what you brought home there is it's about actually actioning it. Otherwise, it just remains abstract, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
And I mean, you're a good example there in terms of, obviously you're in employer branding, so it's very close to your heart. But you action, I can actually see you driving, and hopefully, you've got your leaders and C-suite. It's contagious. They've seen Alex and they're saying, wow, look at that fantastic response, two-way engagement he's getting. So you don't want to force feed, but it also sometimes doesn't come naturally to your execs and your C-suite when it comes to you as the employer brand advocate now saying, right, come guys, we need to make this work. I've built this compelling, strong brand and everything, but it's going to sit on the shelf if we don't have you actually cascading it down and also cross-pollinating it across all the different functions and the different employee teams and that, right?
Yeah, very true. It definitely does have to, you can't just keep it on a shelf. I think it is easy to lose that, and you have to be out there. Like, I think it's a bit of it's a double-edged sword, because you want to be one of the most recognizable and biggest ambassadors, but if you're the only one carrying the torch, right, then and no one else is following you, I think it's tough. Then you're not getting any further ahead, but at least showing that you care about that and you're making the effort. And then once that happens, let the rest of your teammates or your company jump in and do their thing and be advocates. Then you got something good. But yeah, putting a little bit of effort forward goes a long way.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that.
Sure.
All right. And then obviously coming, sort of hooking into that question, how do companies handle that negative employee feedback or the experience of what your employee advocacy framework sort of stands for in that? Because we obviously know that we've got Glassdoor and there's transparency there when it comes to reviews and everything. But now, if you are a advocate and you've been tasked or you have come forward to build this wonderful employee advocacy framework, and it's all of a sudden been met negatively, maybe because you're going through change management, maybe timing's not right, or someone's just sour grapes about something, or they've had a bad hair day or whatever. How do you go about diffusing and addressing this negative experience with these teams or with these employees?
Yeah, I would say that's an interesting dynamic to have, right? Because I think we see the fun and amazing side of employee advocacy where there's no redundancies, there's no like profit hits to a company, stuff that would impact the flow, and everyone's happy. Everyone's saying, "Hey, hashtags, company something life." Everyone is a part of that. But I think if it's in-house, if it's with an individual team or one person who is crucial to you feel is crucial to the cause and mission of the program, it's just having those conversations with them one-on-one. I think we get in our way too much with technology. It's great to have simple Zoom or phone call to resolve that. But I think there's also, it can be difficult when maybe priorities have shifted at a company, or you're going through let's say you have this program in place and you have laid off a percentage of employees. What do you talk about then? I think it's conversation that most companies have probably had over the last 2 years, because that has kind of been the reoccurring theme. And I think just, addressing that as best as you can, obviously knowing where you stand in terms of the grand schemes of things, because, being on the employer branding team, you don't know some of the things that other teams do know and how they handle that. But you can work around, I guess, the lack of content that you would have, because there's always existing like a repository of content you have that can shine a light on the other things that you're doing that can take away from the negativity. But it's really not necessarily like a black and white type of situation. It can be very gray depending on what you are experiencing at your specific company or wherever you're consulting.
Right. And I completely agree with that, Alex, because as we know, employer branding is so fluid and the organization is constantly changing. You don't know what dynamics are happening within. There could be a takeover, there could be a change of leadership, there could be a retrenchment or something, and you've got employees that have remained behind, and now they've been requested to actually participate in supporting your employee advocacy framework. And they say, why should I, when you're laying off people? And I've, for one, have been asked questions around this before, Alex, and that's why I was quite keen to position it with you. And once again, I suppose I know it's around open communication. It's about, as we say, getting upfront, personal, and saying, how do we diffuse this? But at the same time, ensuring that we basically move the shining light onto those people, on all the positivity that's coming out from those groups of people that are living the brand in the true sense.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So just in terms of the key takeaways of where do our audience get started with building and actioning their own program, because some people might have already started it and they might have failed and it's frizzled out for various reasons. Some people, I think I saw in the chat, they are right in the starting blocks of embarking on this employee advocacy program. And there's obviously areas that we need to be aware of. And there's also success factors that you can speak from your experience. And it would be nice to just get an understanding. Let's talk about the common pitfalls and mistakes, and then we can talk about the takeaways based on the common pitfalls and mistakes that our audience can actually utilize to ensure that they don't repeat anything that they don't need to repeat when it comes to failures or mistakes. So what are these pitfalls and mistakes that you've seen either from our little forum or from being in your role at GoDaddy?
Yeah, I've done employee advocacy at every company I've been at. So I've seen when it works well. I've seen when it just falls flat on its face. That happens more times than people would love to share. But I think the common mistake is assuming that it's going to work automatically. It's very much like how you would be managing your employer brand when you're taking over a function at a company or consulting. And it's that it's going to take some time to make that happen. Also, that not every program vendor that you use for your program works. Each one tries to do a lot of the same things. They're not all perfect. And it's not magic where you get every single person on board and you get thousands of people. I know Cisco just put out a very compelling article on Forbes and a lot of other publications as to how they got 1,000, probably closer to 10,000 employees, and they're seeing extensive savings. I would question like how that happened, because it is tough to have, like, you have your first 5 or 6 people and then you build from there. There's a huge drop-off point. You could lose people along the way, you could gain people, but there's no guarantee it's going to work. And then taking it to a higher level is that people assume it's going to naturally just bring people in the door, and that doesn't happen. Just like your adverts and your job descriptions you have out there, your career page, social presence, you have to manage that in a way that's going to work for you, your team, without really inundating people. But it definitely does not, just because you want to start a program, it doesn't lead to overnight success. That's a huge oversight by anybody if they assume it's just going to naturally strike like lightning.
Okay, wonderful. And I think you've hit on quite a few points there, because the intention might be good as your employer brand advocacy champion, but it might not always work because, as you say, they're not intentional, or it might be one of the things on their employer branding job description where they are already overloaded, and they also underestimate the expanse of an advocacy program, Alex. I think there's a lot involved in that. So they've got this wonderful idea, but again, it's about thinking through that whole roadmap and ensuring that you don't actually lose momentum. Obviously, ensure that you've got your resources, you've got almost like your employee advocacy squad, so that you are not pulling this rock up the hill. You've got them to support you as well. I've seen in a few of the clients that I've worked with that if you've got a smaller dynamic group of people within an employer branding squad, they can also do the heavy lifting, and they can also do the scaling in terms of getting word out there and getting the momentum going.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, just looking at the comment from Nani. That's great feedback.
I never read that, sorry.
Yeah, it was just on a previous experience of working at Cisco.
Okay.
No, that's great. Hey, we never, I'm one to, hey, I'm free to stand corrected, or you're only as good as what you read, and then knowing the people behind that. But hey, if that's truly the environment there, kudos to them if they've been able to create that and maintain that for this many years.
Yes, I mean, if you've got just a handful of champions and you can basically get them to support you in your advocacy program, it soon does become contagious when people start seeing that two-way engagement and the positivity that actually emanates from your program as well. I've had a few stop-starts with one of my clients where, unfortunately, time is a gift with everyone and it's not exactly their priority. And then it gets put on the back burner and they're not intentional about supporting you. And you also don't want to force feed people either. It needs to come naturally. If those people that you thought were good advocates to support you do not pan out, then you need to move on, because they also mustn't feel like they have to be compelled in any way to be part of the program.
Yeah, they definitely have to, they got to be compelled to join. It helps to incentivize your teammates to push out content, because for every natural advocate, there's people who got to have a reason to do it. They have a lot going on.
Yes, absolutely. So let's just have a look at the key takeaways, because as you confirmed, you've activated a few advocacy programs. You've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And obviously, it would be nice for our audience to hear what they must heed from doing wrong. What can they do right? What are those highlights that you've seen has worked for you, Alex?
For me, what I say is worked best is to not just putting all your faith into going out there to buy a program from a vendor. The program is only as good as the program that you create internally, creating the structure. We all work through SOPs and accounting for what good looks like success and what blind spots to watch out for. But the program itself has to be well built internally. And I think outside of that, you don't always need to run to a vendor to buy a program to use. I think that's always our first option, is buy the technology. The technology will help us out. But if the structure and the plan behind everything is faulty to begin with, the program is not going to assist you. In fact, when I got here at GoDaddy, we didn't have a program. Several departments have tried to use other programs that just didn't really pan out. So I built everything through a grassroots program in Slack. So just using a channel and just saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're struggling in this one area. I know that this is an area of opportunity for us. So I will create the messaging, I'll attach the graphics. It was very manual. Just copy, paste, download, push this onto your social channels. And I know this is going to work, but you have to believe in me. Let me get 10 people who are crazy enough to believe in what I believe in. Take a chance on that. And then on top of that, I will give you some points, because we may be able to, at our respective companies, give individuals gift cards, give them points with the award systems that we have. Look at that when you're starting from scratch. I think that's a better foundation versus going out to get a program, but see what you have that you can control at palm of your hands, because you likely have a lot there that can help you get this program off on the right start. And then you can get that buy-in to, when you scale, like you have to go to a program after that, right? It's almost necessary. But then while it's still grassroots, if Slack's not an option, Teams is an option. Heck, I've seen people like Allison Cruz, who does the EB function at Baxter. When she got into the space, she did it primarily through email. So there's no real limitations there. And then outside of that, if you're concerned, okay, tracking's not good, how am I going to know that this is working? Google has a Google UTM tracking solution that's free for anybody that has a Google account. So you can have your unique campaigns, and you can make links specific to each individual that is a part of that program that can share that. And then you can track it back in Google Analytics, or drop that even into from Analytics and then into a Google Sheet or Excel sheet to report the results, in terms of clicks, impressions, all that good stuff, to give feedback back to your leadership. So there's a lot that you have there that you can honestly pick up and do in the next month. I don't think it's impossible by any means.
Yes, and I think to your point, Alex, it's around data at the end of the day, because if you've got your leadership team saying, well, Alex, what are you busy with? How's the advocacy program going? It's always nice to have the data. It's good to have the stats. It's good to have those touch points that are actually working to your benefit. If you have to rely on non-organic, that's obviously a big factor as well. And as they say, data and insights always speaks wonders when it comes to, the leadership, and especially if they've tasked you to go about and do this employee advocacy program. And I think to your point, Alex, again, it's that balance between driving the human connection versus the automation. Now, I stand under correction. Yeah, in South Africa, everything is pretty manual, and We sometimes don't have the budget to bring in vendors or bring in IT, and we have to get down to basics in terms of what can we use at our disposal, whether it be Slack, whether it be Monday.com or any of these other platforms that are at our disposal that we can manually make it work. But it also is just as powerful when it comes to being able to collect the data and that. So it's definitely the human. And then obviously your messaging, your narrative behind, come guys, let's action this. This is the benefit. Obviously an incentive, a chocolate, a gift voucher, etc. also does go a long way. But I think when you are in the starting blocks to get the momentum going, if you've got some kind of structure, I would almost hedge my bets more towards Alex and his human touch and his message behind that versus the automated vendor that's going to help Alex do it, right?
Yeah, I think the data is key. Back to your initial point, the data is definitely key. The data is king. That's the thing that's going to really tell your leadership that this is working, providing any sort of update on that. When they see that there is an ROI and there is a savings on the overall bottom line of what the company is going to be huge. But then, from there, yeah, I definitely think the human connection, working directly, treating this like something that is maybe like a team project. We all have annual projects that we work on our respective teams, and treating it that way, like not trying to turn it into something different, which it can be difficult once you start scaling the program because you will go through growing pains, but not expecting too much out of the program, I think, is the vendor, and that program you get from them, I think, is a more realistic approach.
Yes, that's great. And I think right at the outset of our discussion, we spoke about enablement. And I think you're right at the start of building your advocacy program. If you've got the tools that you can sort of circulate and make it just that much easier so people don't see it as outside of their roles, but part of their roles, to almost like an extension, Alex, I would say, almost like an extension of being a team member or a supervisor or an employee in their day-to-day work. Just it's part of their pleasure in their job to be able to intentionally say, wow, I hopped onto a webinar and I've got so much insights. I'm going to actually now motivate this with my manager, and I've learned something. I've upskilled myself. And yeah, I think it's growing pains, but as the leader can also assist with that enablement as well, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah. And then keeping the human in it, as we always say.
Very true.
So just in light of what we've discussed today, I would like to just position the Employer Branding Africa Learning Academy off the back of these conversations that we are going to be having with thought leaders like Alex, because it's really about opening the minds and getting our community educated on the importance and the power behind understanding what employer branding really can do from an influencing point of view. And I have created a number of different courses. I worked on this during the course of 2023. And the first course was very much around personal branding, building an employer brand with heart, because that's really what it's all about. If you are not sold on the fact that you want to create a fantastic advocacy workforce, you're not going to be able to get this off the ground. And it's about you as the key driver, whether you're a qualified employer brand specialist, a TA, a recruiter. If you are not buying in to the upside on having an employee advocacy program, you're going to find it very difficult to land with your C-suite, your leaders, and then also get that team spirit going. And that is why I actually started with the personal branding, because that whole mindset needs to change from that on almost like transactional. Recruitment marketing is also, it's an extension. Employee advocacy is an extension to basically another channel to getting people on board, to getting followers to your organization. And then the signature course is around building an employer brand framework part of which is obviously that employee advocacy program, but within it is that focused approach, which, as you can hear, Alex has spoken about today. It's very much project-based, right, Alex, within the realm of the bigger employer branding role.
Yeah, that's true.
So hop on there and just have a look in terms of this all dovetailing into the topic on employee advocacy, because it all does help if you can get your head around how your employer brand can become recognizable through not just putting social media posts out there, but also influencing from within. Okay, we've got to the Q&A, and Alex, maybe we can have a look at this together.
Yeah, that, or if anybody wants to, come on video and off mute, happy to answer any questions live if that helps out.
Wonderful. Please go ahead. We've got Alex here, and I'm sure he'll be just too happy to answer any questions that might be within the context of your environment.
Hi. Thanks
Hey.
for sharing all your information. I have a question I'd like to ask, please. Can you share some of the work or some examples of the collaboration with marketing and communication, right? Because in most instances for brand building efforts, there's a partnership between, the human capital teams and the marketing and comms teams. And I'd just like to get a sense from you of the collaboration and how you work together. You mentioned marketing and comms earlier when you were speaking, but didn't really go into how you work together. So I wanted to get some insights from you on your experiences in partnerships with marketing and comms teams.
Yeah, sure. So overall with employer branding or specific to employee advocacy?
Both, I think both.
Okay, so it's been really good. I know we hear a lot of stories where there's inner fighting, between different departments.
Yeah.
Could be further from the truth here, but also I guess my approach is different than most, because I've seen where it works really well, where they partner with you, give you the assets. They, they'll create stuff for you, right? More of a friendship and partnership. But then I've seen too where, okay, there was a lot of, we're not going to let you do this. You're not a real branding person. You're not a real comms and marketing person. There's almost like a turf battle that I've had before. But here at GoDaddy, it's been really, really good, because we have our photography and creative team is like their own in-house agency or studio, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we'll send requests to them, and they were very supportive of my work from the beginning, because it probably is more of my situation where I joined with the team of 6 and then they all quit. They had different ambitions. So they went to other companies, like great people, but they, I just joined at the wrong time. So they were supportive where, okay, hey, if it was something quick that needed to be created on social, like a LinkedIn post, Facebook or story or TikTok, hey, we trust your skills enough where, okay, just do that. And I got that from just telling them, hey, listen, I know brand guidelines. I'm not looking to take your job or do what you're doing. I'm looking to mirror that, but with an employer branding type of flair, right? Our audiences are different. And then in turn, when it came down to bigger initiatives such as, okay, we need something designed, like we put out our I Belong Here, You Belong Here video. That was a phenomenal collaboration, the best I've had of my career. And that was working with them to say, hey, this is my vision. How can we go there? And I kid you not, we worked step by step to storyboard everything, to get out cameras to our teammates, and then design it in the image that I wanted, which, most cases doesn't happen, right? You typically get marketing telling you, okay, this is the way it should be done. So we have that in like internship programs. We work on the themes together. So anything like super high level, if you look at it that way, like if it's I'm a big Marvel fan, clearly by the photos back here. But if we're making like an MCU movie like X-Men or Avengers, that's when that team comes in. But if we're doing like a small TV series, I'm going to handle that on my own.
Yeah. I hear you. Thank you so much. My experiences have been varied, and I like hearing about the experiences of others around what works and what doesn't. But I've always found a lot of value in the partnerships because
Agreed.
ultimately it's one brand you're all representing. Thank you so much for sharing.
Not a problem.
Wonderful. Thanks, Natasha, and thanks, Alex. I think, yeah, there's always that food between marketing and HR, but I think, as you say, it depends on how you land it. It depends on having a look at the Achilles heel in terms of what's in it for marketing as well. You're basically bolstering their brand, the one brand approach in that. And it's a fine line because there's respect for their territory, but it's also being able to say, I can add value as well when it comes to exposure and creating a good brand reputation out there.
Yeah, agreed. And I think I'm not a fan when the various teams say, hey, this is my brand. No, this is not your brand. We all work for the same company. So if it's like if we take one of our teams to the Olympics, for our countries, and okay, we have the basketball team thinks they're different than the track team. That never works that way. You have to be united. And I see the industry moving more towards that. Happy to see, because people have more of a I say this being very biased as an employer branding person, that I think there's more respect for what we do. We're not just seen as people with imposter syndrome who are jumping in and trying to act like they know these various functions. We are knowledgeable, credible. We know what we do.
Yes, exactly. Any other questions?
Any question? No? It doesn't have to be on employee advocacy. If you have any employer branding questions, it's wide open.
I mean, employee advocacy is such a broad topic, and I think especially this year, I've seen that it's basically held center stage quite a bit. I think it's also because of this whole level of uncertainty and almost like internalizing that employer brand camaraderie and getting everyone to work together and vouch for each other, and almost like embedding that positive employer brand internally as opposed to outside. I almost see that as employee advocacy as well, cross-pollinating it with your different teams. Yeah,
that's true. I mean, there's a lot of doing that. I mean, there's a lot of selling and just like really, it's almost like it's a bit of selling and like just trying to show, okay, hey, this is really how great this can be. A lot of getting buy-in. I mean, I don't want to say playing politics. I think that has a negative connotation with that, but a lot of selling to get people to back what you're doing and to to embrace everything.
Yeah, no, completely. And I think, just correct me if I'm wrong, but when it comes to timing on actually kickstarting an employee advocacy program, is there a right time or not, Alex? Or do you have to have a look at the climate that resides within?
Well, I would say the wrong time is, let's say if there's a lot of redundancies and you decide, okay, it's a great time to kickstart it the next week. Terrible. That's typically when everybody's a little quiet on social. If you have an existing program, you're probably not sharing too much to stay light, to lay low. But outside of that, I mean, there's never going to be a good time. So I think the best time outside of any sort of redundancies is next week, next month. And you only know until you try. I mean, we tried ours here at GoDaddy late fall of 2021. And then we kickstarted with our vendor, Please Share, in June. So there are two different times, right? I'm always honest and transparent about my approaches. And like, I'm not going to tell you that, hey, June is the best time ever just to get views, impressions, and all that good stuff. But just, you got to be the best person at your company to read the room, feel where you're at. And if you feel it's a good time, then you got to go with that then.
Yeah. When it comes to redundancies, you don't kickstart thereafter. But it's pretty, if you can read the room as best as possible, then there's no better time than kickstarting. Why should you wait? Making a start is better than not making a start at all. And there are going to be detours. You're going to have to roll with some of the punches and that, but it's better than not starting at all, right?
Yes, I agree. Yeah, there's definitely the punches that come in, right? like that line you mentioned there. But you're never going to know until you try. And there's no better time to try than today or tomorrow.
Yeah, completely. Okay, folks, if there's no further questions, there's all my contact details, and Alex is very much on LinkedIn. He's a wonderful, wonderful advocate for employer branding. He's most admired as well in the universal employer branding community. So please look him up on LinkedIn and be sure to connect with him.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex, and thank you, Celeste. It was great.
Only a pleasure. Thank you to everyone coming to the inaugural Spotlight webinar, and I'm planning to do one middle of March again. So just look out on the LinkedIn employer branding and Facebook employer branding groups, and I'll be sure to keep you posted. Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon further, everyone.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, everyone.